So let's talk a little bit about poster design and what makes a good poster. So there are a few things that you need to consider. First thing that you need to consider is your overall design, your layout. So you're thinking about your composition and the elements of principles of art. What is the background made up of? Is it shapes? How are they laid out? How is the space broken up? What colors are you using and where? So it's kind of the overall placement of things. You have to have an idea of that, and you have to have a strong design to create a good poster. So the next thing that you need to think about, the next important thing is the title. That is the most important piece of information that's going to be on your poster. If it's a poster for an event, let's say, that's what we're going to use as an example. Um, if someone's walking by, you need the event title to be big and stand out. That is the first thing you want people to see because then they say, hey, that's an event that I'm interested in. So once you have their eye caught, think about what's the next piece of information you want them to know. The next thing that they're going to want to know is the secondary information, like when and where. So the date or place that the event is happening. Because if I say, hey, that concert is something that I'm interested in, the next piece of information I want to catch is, oh, it's on December 1st. Cool, I can go then, or I can't. Once I look at it and say, okay, that date works for me, now I'm going to slow down and start to read the poster. So the rest of the information doesn't have to be as big because by the time they're getting to that information, they're actually standing in front of it and reading. So you want to make sure that the title stands out and that the important secondary information stands out next. Finally, you're going to want details and other information. So if it's an event, this is stuff like websites, directions, ticket information, phone numbers, opening acts or other details like that that are less important and that only people who have stopped to get the information need to know. So let's talk about a couple key things that you want to keep in mind when you're creating your posters. For a good poster, you want to make sure overall that your design and feel relate to what you're advertising. So if you're advertising a children's party, the poster is going to feel a lot different than if you're advertising like a business conference. You're going to use different colors, different fonts, different imagery. So you want to make sure that the overall feel is appropriate. The one on the right is for a comic book festival, and it's very appropriate because it looks like a page out of a comic book. So it matches what the event is about. It uses comic fonts, it has comic characters on it, and they're even reading comics. So the thing that is happening in the artwork relates to the event. The Goonies poster on the left, it relates because it's all the imagery relates. We have the woods and the house, which is where it's set. It has to do with treasure and pirates, and they go in a cave. It's also kind of rough and dirty. They're crawling around in the mud, underground in water, and so the colors that they chose for the poster relate to that. They're a little bit duller, a little more earthy, so it kind of relates to the feel of the movie. Along those lines, you want to make sure that you limit your colors and make them relate. So if you notice both of these, they have a very limited palette. The Goonies one is really just those kind of tan colors. So it's the darker brown and then the yellowish tan brown color and then the kind of cream color. And they repeat those colors throughout. They're consistent in making sure that they're limiting the colors and using them in multiple places. Same thing with the one on the right for the comic book convention. Limited colors, there's really only like 4 colors, but even within those, they are different values. Like the dark color of their hair is actually just a slightly darker value than her tights or her skirt. So it all ties together. Another thing that you want to try to do is incorporate your text into the design. You can go really extreme, like the one on the right, where the text is really a main focus in the design. And it is really, really working with the picture. Same thing with the one on the left with the big three. The text is a main element in the design. Um, or the one in the middle, the text is incorporated into the design by going at the same angles as the design elements and being in sections of the design elements. So the text isn't just freestanding alone, separate from the design, but the design is there to house the text. So you want to make sure that all things that you're putting in your poster are tied together and relating visually and working together, and they look like they're part of one design. You want to make sure that you organize your information and make it readable. Like we talked about on the first slide, you need to think about what's most important. The text, the title. So the one on the right, it says Big Sandy, that's the title. Then the date, the place, that's going to be like the second size, and then so on. And things would get smaller as you go, as they're less important. Another thing you want to consider is using visual lines. And that means that you have invisible lines that you use to line up sections of your design. So the one on the left with all of the text, the red one, if you draw an invisible line down the side, starting at where it says to bad and then complete, and the lines in between those chunks of text, they all line up exactly with each other. That helps create a nice cohesive design because I can see the relation and I can tell that this piece of text is relating to this piece of text is relating to this, and they're not just all thrown in there separately. They have been considered based on the one before it. And then the Wicked poster, it's more subtle, but if you look at the title Wicked and then underneath it where it says The Untold Story of the Witches of Oz, that fits, that ends, it starts and ends with the W and the D, and then the chunk of text underneath that also fits with that. Even down at the bottom where it says Call Ticketmaster, that lines up. So having a relation between all of your different elements and making sure that they line up with each other within the poster, not everything, but this lines up with this and this lines up with this, so that there's a clear relation between the different parts of your design. Simple is not bad. And when we do a poster, you'll probably be leaning more towards a simple design, but you can say a lot with just a couple simple pieces of imagery or shape and design. The one on the left, I don't know exactly what it's for, but as we talk about it in class, we kind of come to the conclusion that it is kind of a dark story. It looks like a skull and a shovel and even a knife or something sharp. So it looks like it probably has to do with death or murder or burying. And I can get that just from the simple imagery that's there. So simple is not bad because it also makes it nice and bold and clear. So it is really effective because you can see the information and it's not cluttered by extra stuff. Being consistent with your details is very important, meaning having your colors repeat, having textures or shapes or patterns repeat throughout your design so that it visually connects from section to section. Like on this one with the houses, they all have the same shapes for the roofs. They have repeating textures. I can see the same texture in multiple places. I can see the same color in multiple places. They all have kind of a rough texture to them. So it's consistent. Every part of the poster has the same style and the same feel. Um, Using positive and negative space to create contrast is a good way to create a strong design because it makes things stand out. It's very clear where the parts are. It makes the text very clear and readable. And it just makes a nice striking design that is really eye-catching. Most of all, you need to be thinking about your composition. So this is where you're going to go back to your note sheet, the composition notes, where it goes over the rule of thirds, and it also goes over the tips for creating a strong composition, where it has things like breaking borders, putting things on a slant, using overlapping, going back to those elements and principles of art, using repetition. All of those things are what are going to ultimately help you create a strong poster design. In the middle, we have the overlapping. We have different images overlapping each other within each other. The one on the left, it's not an actual poster design, it's more of like a mock-up poster, but just using text as an element there and having things on a slant just to make the design a little bit more interesting. Notice on that one too, the information is scaffolded, so the more important thing stands out, and then the secondary information is smaller, and then there's different sizes. Same thing with West Side Story. The title is clear. They've thought about the composition and where things go. They use visual lines. They have limited colors. So you want to make sure that you think about all of these things as you're working on your design, when you're working on sketches, and when you're in the computer. Also look at the note sheet that is provided for you, tips for a strong poster design. It talks about a lot of the things from this PowerPoint, but it also has a few more and goes into more detail about them. So you can use that as a reference as you're working on your poster. It's basically an answer key. If your poster uses those things, then hopefully that means that you have created a strong poster design.